This podcast is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and is a production of VI Alliance, copyright 2019. And this chart-busting hit, Alone Leave Me, courtesy of New Threads, is available everywhere. Hi, this is Julie, and I am here with Susan, and we are continuing with part 6 of Neville Goddard's The Power of Awareness, a conversation and highly energized discussion. And, you know, I had to laugh because we're starting with chapter 17, All Things Are Possible, and from our last discussion and the last parts that we go on, we talk about how to integrate it here, yet, you know, I look from the energy, you look from the physical, and we go back and forth. And I just laughed out loud when we were starting to get involved with this chapter, because the first sentence, he says that, you know, these principles outlined in the book have been proven time and time again by the personal experience of the author. So if you need any proof,
I never denied
in this chapter, not you, I'm not saying anything
else.
personal, I'm saying it says in this chapter, 25 years he's applied these principles and he's had innumerable, you know, successes, and it works. And, you know, it's funny because I dog-eared, I love books, and I dog-eared this chapter. And I think when you're doing this work and you're looking at this book and you're trying to figure stuff out, to really highlight this chapter, I mean, you could reread this chapter every day to get yourself in the zone of just what it's all about. And, you know, he says further down, and I know we're trying not to read from the book, but he says, live your life in a sublime spirit of confidence and determination. Disregard appearances, conditions, in fact, all evidences of your senses that deny the fulfillment of your desire. Rest in the assumption that you are already what you want to be, for in that determined assumption, you and your infinite being are merged in creative unity, and with your infinite being, in parentheses, God, all things are possible. God never fails. I mean, if you could just replay that.
I was saying that could be a mantra. You could say it. It's so funny because I noted the same thing. I'm like, you could use that as your mantra every day.
Yep. You know, it's funny because as we go further down, I mean, this is a great chapter. It's kind of like, you know, when you're, I don't know, taking a long bike ride or you're doing a long walk and you just said, oh, there's a nice bench to sit on, and you just absorb it all. And he talks about, you know, surrendering yourself to the ideal, you know, with what you want to create for your reality. And, you know, once again, I'm trying to be careful of my words because all our words go into different arenas of definition. And I kind of laughed at that part too, because the energy is just so wonderful. And, you know, really, instead of surrendering to everything that's going on out there, social media, the news, what they say is going to happen, people aren't going to be able to retire, oh my gosh, where are you going to get your money from, you got to get a job. I mean, every day we always surrender to that stuff when we go into worry and we go into all this external subjective situations with our assumptions. And instead, we just need to surrender to ourselves, you know, surrender ourselves to ourselves.
To our ideal, our ideal. And it's interesting because, you know, the next chapter, of course, is be doers. And, you know, I know you always say to me, I'm always like, what's the do? What's the do? And, you know, the interesting part is that the doing is this work. So that's why when I even go into the how, it's really to do this work, because, you know, clearly, it's like he says, you deceive yourself by, quote, hearing only when you expect your desire to be fulfilled through mere wishful thinking. You have to do the work of seeing yourself and acceptance and belief and all of that. And it's funny because that's the real work. And that really is still very difficult.
And I love that that's the only do. I mean, to clarify it, you know, simply, I'm going to use that word again, the only do is to keep the feeling of your wish fulfilled constantly alive in your consciousness. And that's the work. That's doing the work. Keep the wish fulfilled constantly alive in your consciousness. And there's the do. There's the law of assumption. And, you know, going further down in that Be Doers chapter, I mean, it's funny because he talks about, you know, I love to bring up this word because I talk about this as the key, but, you know, it's almost like this is the secret, you know, the real secret in there, because I love your reaction to that, because I agree with you on, you know, what occurred with quote unquote the secret out there. And, you know, when you discover that this is the key that you have and it's inside you, I mean, then he goes into kind of the metaphor of, it's the key to the treasure house, and you should be like the good servant who by wise use multiplied by many times the talents entrusted to him. And that talent, I mean, he's been kind of, hinting at this, that all these things are available to us to utilize because we do them anyway. And that talent is, the power to consciously use your assumption for yourself.
So what I see in here, everything you see is interesting, but what I go to is at the end of the chapter, in the be ye doers, is, what he says is your concept of yourself can only be driven out of consciousness by another concept of yourself. So in terms of the do, and if you're, sometimes when all else fails, when you're trying to get a certain, concept out of your mind, the focus is to not even focus on it, just to focus on what you do want. It's so funny. A lot of times, I think we try to say, how do I get these thoughts out of my head? I have these ideas, these thoughts. Sometimes it's in letting them go. And he says it right here, just create the new thought. And by default, the old thought has to go. There's no room for both.
Right.
And I think that's pretty powerful.
Right.
I think that's, almost like psychology, when people talk about things that happened in the past, and I know I go off in a little bit of a tangent, but I think it relates perfectly to, you have to go back into what happened, you have to analyze it, you have to put it aside, versus sometimes the way of thinking of just create the new. Where are you today? Where do you want to go? And whatever happens is.
That's funny because you were talking about going off on a tangent, and I kind of did, because it just floors me that, how many of us really consider that we have created a concept of ourselves. And anytime I hear that word concept, I can't help but think about, and this is where I'm going to go on a tangent, to Robin Williams. Because I remember when Robin Williams sadly died, Billy Crystal came out and did, an honorable program for him. And it was, the focus and the theme of it was Robin Williams, what a concept. And when you really start to accentuate that you do in fact have a concept of yourself.
Yeah,
I mean, how many people can even get to that?
I think that's really a great observation.
I mean, when you really go to we all have concepts of ourselves, and we're going to stay there. We're not going to go to concepts of other people and concepts of things. We're going to go right to the most important thing is you do have a concept of yourself.
You know what? Because our concept of someone else is nothing more than a mirror image of our concept of ourselves. That's where jealousy and anger and all of that comes in. Yeah, I know.
Isn't that wild? Yeah. I mean, that's and take a second to really absorb that. You do have a concept of yourself. And if, I'm going to go out on a limb here, if, your life isn't working and you want to make changes and stuff, well, isn't that funny? You change the concept of yourself, and guess what? It kicks out that old concept.
Well, it's here. He says he refers to the soul as being the sum of all of you. It's all of what you believe, think, feel, and accept as true of your. And I'm adding in of yourself. And how you see yourself is going to be a bigger part of everything. If you're going to feel, he's using the word feeling to put yourself in the space of your desire achieved or your goal achieved. So what does that mean? And I'm jumping ahead because he talks, it doesn't mean about a bigger bank account, it doesn't mean about a car, it's really about the feeling and the concept you have of yourself is what changes. It's not you see yourself, I have more money and I can, it's none of that. It's really your concept of, that's where everything lies.
Right, it's not things, it's not any of that, right? It's that part. And, that's hugely powerful. And there's no other word to say but powerful. I mean, and it's everything that all of us have. It's not like you got to go out and buy it somewhere. You have to, undertake somebody's program or go get a coach.
Yeah, exactly. Even his description of righteousness and sin doesn't necessarily go into religious aspect. It really goes into your viewpoint, your concept. I'm going to use the word you're bringing in of yourself. As he talks about it here, the meaning of sin means to miss the mark, not to attain your desire, not to be the person you want to be is sinning. So sinning and righteousness has nothing to do with whatever is described out there. It has everything to do with your concept of yourself.
Right. And, again, that has been kind of tarnished by religion and, everything surrounding religion and sin and, definitions in that arena. And what's really cool in this chapter on righteousness is that he, in other chapters as well, he has specific passages from the Bible, quotes from the Bible, where you can see, and he attributes the words, understanding what righteousness really means in that context. And of course out there could take it out, and religion has kind of defined it in a different way. And yet for righteousness to not be the thing itself, but it's the consciousness and the feeling of getting into that zone and that concept of the person you want to be, and that's it. It's kind of like that's where your focus is, that's where your attention is.
And what's interesting is there's many times that, sometimes you hear a story of people from another country or a different cultural background and certain things that they do that we would define as sinning. I mean, I'm talking about, just Christian viewpoint, and I'm not trying to get into religion, but I'm just trying, even cultural. You would look at something and say, oh my God, how can they do that? Yet, if you were brought up and a part of another culture, something that we here do might be considered sinning. So it really, even the idea of sin, if you take it from an outside viewpoint, if I'm going to take what I believe and project that onto someone else, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Because that person, maybe from a different culture, does something, and it's actually more, it's an honorable thing to do.
Right.
But I don't know it, and I think they're sinning. So it's, once again, the idea of sin is, how do you define it? Every culture has a different definition of what a sin would be. So if you take it to the Bible and you think of it exactly like you're saying, the sin would be not to be fully who you are and who you choose to be. And the idea of righteousness isn't, and he talks about if you don't put yourself in happy, positive, and I'm using generic words, so just play with me on that, but that it's not righteous. It's not because, you're not good, and I'm using quotes, being defined by out there. It's because if you have bad thoughts and you're doing things that are lower than really who you really are, and I'm just going to throw out like you're out stealing, it's really not your highest and best. And it's not, it's bad and you're not supposed to do this. And I'm not going to get into the religious discussion, but by taking something from someone else, you're not really being the best you can be.
Right.
And therefore, that's why it's a sin. So righteousness isn't a determination of how things appear on the outside. It really is, are you not being your best self? You're not bringing your best self forward. So therefore, it is a sin.
Again, it pulls me back to the other chapters that we looked at in the middle crux there, that we're just saying, take all this stuff and use it for yourself. And you look at any of these interpretations when you say that about, religion and stuff, and you look at, I'm going to go here, where the Bible, how it has been interpreted, it's more interpreted, that example you gave was perfect, based on looking out there and what someone else is doing, and it is quote-unquote judgment.
Yeah.
And yet what he's saying is, you look at these passages, and what the words translate to is not looking out there, it's inside, in the treasure house that you have of power and ability inside that you're not utilizing for yourself, and you're not utilizing in assumption. And I think in, going back to chapter 19 in Essentials, he goes through like the various parts of, how to use the law of assumption successfully. And there's a lot of merit in understanding that, he explicitly states, first, yearning, longing, intense burning desire have to be a part of it. And it's the funny part of that is when I think of those words, those are real personal words. Mm-hmm. Those are, when you yearn for something, you go into, what, I'm not talking about things. I'm talking about when you yearn for something, you go into the nature and the core of your soul and who you are. And what that stems from. And so these things are real personalized. And when he goes into the second part, cultivate physical immobility, it's funny because he completely goes like outside of the physical and goes right to the energy.
I knew you'd love that part.
Right to the energy. And it's just full force, mental force, and imagination and concentration. And then, the last part, I think the third one is experience in your imagination what you would experience in reality had you achieved your goal. And so you're surrendering yourself and imagining that possession. And once again, it's not a thing. It's not a thing at all.
So that's one of the things that, because we talk about all the different books that we read, and, that I always believe there's one golden nugget. In all the books that we've done, they're all really, really powerful and great. And the golden nugget within this, and in the whole book, like you said, we can almost discuss every line, and we try to it took us a long time to figure out even how to discuss it, because there was so much here, it is in feeling. And it is in feeling who you are. That's all of this is feeling who you are. Strong, powerful, smart, whatever the word is that you want to use. I'm just throwing out adjectives, but it's in each one of these. It's like you said. It's not a thing. It's not. Oh, I'm counting money. It's not. It's how do you feel when this is going on? And it's interesting because we talk about energy, and we've had a hard time sometimes defining energy in a different way because there is a feeling to it. But it's not, it can be through hearing, it could be seeing, it can be tasting, all of the senses, but it's a deeper understanding of the senses. And that's really where he is going with all of this. It's not counting money, it's what are you feeling when that money is being counted? Is it you feel safe? Is it you feel secure? You feel at peace? Whatever it is. Or I'm going to throw this in there for, what if it's a feeling of disgust? You've got all this money and you feel disgust. What does that say? Are you really going to bring that into your... And the only reason I say it is that when you're talking about bringing something to fruition, you have to also look at that feeling that we're talking about. That really is the answer, is that feeling.
So, I'm kind of holding back on saying anything because and this is a little teaser, because after we finish The Power of Awareness, we're going to be talking about Neville Goddard's Feeling is the Secret. And I was just blown away. You can find it online, prepare yourself, go into it. It's very small, it's not that many pages, and it is amazing. I
haven't read it.
Really is amazing, and I have, and I can't wait to look at it again and to have the conversation.
Who knows, we may have a different discussion.
Well, no worries, it'll be coming up right after this one, and it's intriguing to me that documentation he did, Feeling is the Secret, which really goes into feeling.
Yes.
You could see that you can pull out all these things and really go wild with them, and there's a real intensity to that. And I think in this book, with The Power of Awareness, he really shares with us that there's nothing we have to do. And that's funny because in the free will chapter, the first he says, everybody asks what should be done between the assumption of the wish fulfilled and its realization, and the answer is nothing.
Well, and there's two things. I agree with you, but I'm gonna say two things. Number one is you have to be aware of your own basic concept of yourself, which is what he says. And number two, which is a big thing because it comes to time, is going from changing from I will be to I am. So those are really, and there is no, that's not a physical do. I know, I'm playing on words here.
No, what's really cool about that's a you do. That's a for you. That has nothing to do with outside. You don't have to vacuum and clean the house.
Exactly.
You don't have to go buy anything. You don't have to do anything. That is so like...
But that is the do. That is the to-dos, those two things. Be aware, and if you're not happy with your concept of yourself, change it. And if you are, go even further into it. And the other part, which was huge for me, and I'm being personal, is going from I will be, to I am. I mean, those are the two to-dos. That is the two huge things that I get so far. I mean, and all the stuff we talked about helps when you're struggling. We all have a day where we struggle in trying to do this, whatever occurs, and you feel like, oh, I'm just having such a hard day. How do I get back into that? And he gives awesome little things that you can do to help. But the only to do really is those two things.
And, it's funny because at some point in the last podcast, you brought up a brilliant question. And I went further to say, why would all this kind of be occurring there, to fulfill the matrix and stuff? I mean, why wouldn't we take all our stuff and the tools and faculties that we have and utilize them with that power of awareness for ourselves? And, I kind of threw out, maybe the question is why, and that's fascinating. And, he says here in the beginning of the free will chapter that it's a delusion that there's anything else we have to do. Right. I'm fine with just that statement. I don't have to go into any further why. I mean, sure, I can make a great movie and we could write a great book and everything. Yet, the two things that you just mentioned, I mean, really tie it up nicely. And just doesn't it kind of give you a sense of relief? I mean, it's really...
I'm gonna read the last paragraph, and that's gonna lead into the next podcast, because this is a mouthful and a half. The important thing to bear in mind is that you have infinite free will in choosing your assumptions, but no power to determine conditions and events. You can create nothing, but your assumption determines what portion of creation you will experience. So stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts. Find New Threads music and their latest album on iTunes, Spotify, and newthreads.us.